Navigating messy wide receiver rooms. I love it. Let's talk about it right now on Fantasy Football Today Express. This is a fun topic. What to do with the most crowded wide receiver rooms? I think you got to start with the Chiefs. I remember when we first did a draft, maybe in January or February, I feel like Rashee Rice went at the 2-3 turn. And then he was going super late. We thought he was going to be suspended. Now we're thinking it might not happen this year. All right, let's navigate the Chiefs wide receiver room, Heath. And how are you looking at that group?
It's not who I thought you were going to start with, but now you can spend this time that I'm talking thinking about who you should have started with. No, I am more and more starting to think that Rashee Rice is not going to be suspended this year. And so that does really complicate things. Rice is now once again my favorite wide receiver in the Chiefs wide receiver room. I am ready now to take him maybe at that 5-6 turn. He's creeping back up. Marquise Brown right behind him. And then you look for Xavier Worthy probably in the round 7, round 8 range. I think the really interesting thing will be when they're in 2 wide receiver sets, who are the 2 wide receivers on the field? And I would guess right now it's going to be Rashee Rice and Marquise Brown, and Worthy's going to take that from Brown.
Okay. It must be, if not Kansas City, it must be Buffalo.
Buffalo. Okay. I was thinking maybe it was the team with 3 wide receivers ranked in everyone's top 30.
Chicago?
No. The Houston Texans.
Oh, yeah.
Nico Collins and Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs. It's like the high.
What about New England?
Situation.
Let's talk about New England instead.
New England is not who we want to talk about. So with the Texans, I am drafting Nico Collins first. But I don't have the same certainty that everyone else seems to. I think in our pick by pick, Jamie took Nico at the 2-3 turn. I prefer Nico at the 3-4 turn. I will take Tank Dell at the 4-5 turn and Stephon Diggs pretty much right after him. But I wouldn't actually be that surprised if Tank Dell ends up being the best. And I think based on where current ADP is, Tank Dell is definitely the best value.
I wouldn't be that surprised if I wouldn't be that surprised if any of them ended up the best. You don't seem to feel that way about Diggs. I agree with you about Dell, but I would also add Diggs in there.
I wouldn't be that surprised if Diggs was second. But I especially since the Texans made it pretty clear this is like a 1-year rental thing. It'd be kind of weird when they've got the other 2 guys locked up for long term to just feed Diggs and ask one of those guys to take a back seat for 17 games.
Well, I don't think it'd be a back seat.
Because Diggs, that's the thing. The thing is, Diggs is not going to be in my opinion, anywhere close to as efficient with his targets as Collins and Dell. And so Diggs is going to need a lot more targets than them to be better than them in fantasy.
It's going to be really interesting. Really, really interesting. I just cannot wait for week 1.
Clearly the most interesting.
It is.
Wide receiver room.
Chicago's pretty interesting too. We'll talk about them after this break on Fantasy Football Today Express. Okay, the Chicago Bears, slightly more interesting than the, say, New England Patriots or Buffalo Bills receiving corps. How about the Bears? How do you see that one? Do you think that one is a more clear? DJ Moore is definitely going to be the main.
Yeah, I've got it ranked that way. Certainly, we're drafting it that way. I feel a little bit nervous about it, and that's why I think we're lower on DJ Moore than what consensus is. He's not a top 20 wide receiver. He's wide receiver 23, basically a round 4 pick. And I'm waiting all the way until the 7-8 turn before I'm looking for Keenan Allen or Rome Odunze. And I do prefer Keenan Allen to Rome Odunze. But again, if you're looking at where these guys are sitting in terms of their ADP, I think Moore is more expensive than what we're willing to spend. So I'd probably rather invest in the cheaper guys.
Yeah, I think unfortunately Keenan Allen is also going to be more expensive. I think he's like a 6th round pick. On Draft Sharks, he's a 6th round pick. On Fantasy Pros, he is going 71st. So yeah, it's a 6th round pick. CBS, I'm not 100% sure, but Odunze might be the one you end up with the most of. I'm not sure. Actually, no, Keenan Allen 85th on CBS, so that's a lot more palatable. And Odunze on CBS is 112th.
Yeah, I'd take Rome at that cost.
I don't think Rome is a top 100 pick anywhere. So yeah, 106. Yeah, he's not. Looking at 3 different sources of ADP. All right, how about Oh, I'm wrong. Sorry. He's the last pick of round 8, and so he's almost just inside in a draft sharks.
You want to talk about the Packers?
Yeah, let's go Pack. Go ahead.
Would you?
I was going to go with Buffalo.
Yeah, I think the Packers are interesting just because Jaden Reed and Christian Watson have both shown us this enormous upside on limited games and limited snaps. And Reed's performance came largely when somebody was hurt, and he barely played in 2 wide receiver sets. All that being said, I'm still drafting Jaden Reed first, but just a couple picks ahead of Christian Watson. They're both round 6/7 picks for me around wide receiver 35. And there's a pretty big gap between those two and everyone else. I think Romeo Doubs is going to play most of the time, but probably not matter all that much for fantasy. Dontavian Wicks, very exciting if something happens to Reed and Watson, but Reed and Watson are really the 2 guys I'm drafting. And for now, it's Jaden Reed over Christian Watson. I have a feeling if we get through a couple of preseason games and Christian Watson hasn't missed a practice due to a hamstring injury, I'm going to start buying into this procedure that he had over the offseason, or the work that he did. If you're just tuning in, to even the size of his hamstrings, so he doesn't have hamstring issues any longer.
Yeah, I'm actually currently drafting Watson, not like at the moment, but I'm Watson over Reed. So I hope you can join the club. I don't want to feel so lonely.
I am Watson over Neighbors. So,
I'm not Watson over Neighbors. And that is, by the way, not a crowded receiving room. We do not need to talk about the Giants. All right, how about the Jaguars, Bills, and Chargers? Are you drafting the? Oh no, that's a stupid question for the Jaguars. But for the Bills and the Chargers, are you drafting the rookie first?
So for the Bills, I do currently have Keon Coleman first, and he had a really nice training camp highlight that I assume is going to bump his ADP up a little bit, but I'm not drafting any Bills wide receivers before in round 9. I have Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, and Curtis Samuel all between wide receiver 49 and 56. And I don't really expect that those guys are probably going to be starters on a weekly basis. You said Chargers?
Yeah.
A little bit more excited about those guys, although it sounds like both Ladd McConkey and Justin Herbert are working through some things, which is I think the phrase that Harbaugh likes to use. I still have McConkey 1 spot ahead of Josh Palmer, but I think they're completely different types of players. They're both in the wide receiver 40s. I would much rather draft McConkey as my wide receiver 4 or 5 or 6 on my bench. I'd much rather draft Josh Palmer if it's one of those teams where I started running back heavy and maybe got a good quarterback and a good tight end, and I'm just looking for starting wide receivers. I think the odds are that Palmer's better, McConkey's ceiling is higher.
All right, finally, Dallas. CeeDee Lamb's holding out. Are you going to take Brandon Cooks ahead of him?
I am not going to take any other Cowboys wide receivers at this time other than CeeDee Lamb, and I'm going to take him before all of the other wide receivers in the NFL.
And why don't you go take a shower and get to bed, Heath, because you got a flight at 5 in the morning or something like that. So thank you for hanging out late here. This Sunday night we're recording this. And that is Heath Cummings. I am Adam Azer. This is Fantasy Football Today Express. We'll talk to you next time.